Well, good morning, everybody, or good evening, good day. We're covering the entire globe. I know there are many, many fans of Amy dialing in from China today, so we'll cover all that. Anyway, welcome to WildChina's book club event. My name is Mei, and I'm the founder of WildChina. So let me say a few words about WildChina, and then I'll go ahead and introduce our speakers and guests. WildChina works in travel world, but as you can imagine, we're all sheltering at home, right? I never really looked at WildChina as a travel agency anyway. I looked at our job, a really fun job of fostering sort of understanding of China on a human level. We don't do anything that's covered on New York Times or Wall Street Journal. That's why in the past, we could just, as individuals travel to China and really meet the Chinese. Now we can't do that. So we are bringing China to you. That's what we're trying to do. And we'll read a book a month. We don't talk a lot about politics. I'll leave that to my husband. Instead, we do talk about art, music, food, family, looking for some commonalities of humanity, I guess, across boundaries, across border. Now, this one for the book club for this month, we read this incredible book, The Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mom. And today we have Amy Chua, the original Tiger Mom, forgive me for saying that, here with us. And we also have Wendy Perrin with us as a co-host. Now, let me say a few words about Wendy. For those of us in the travel world, this is a very familiar name. Wendy worked for 18 years at Condé Nast Traveler magazine, and she went on to launch wendyperrin.com. That's where you go to find the best travel specialists from around the world. I'm honored to be on the list for China. I invited Wendy for a couple of reasons. One, she's in the trenches with us, a mother of two teenage boys, about to go to college, one of them about to go to college. And secondly, Wendy is the best person to probe any question related from a traveler perspective. And Wendy's dedicated her time to raise kids as global trotters. So it's slightly different direction. And also, both of you, actually, Amy and Wendy, both of you are Harvard alumni. Anyway, so thank you, Wendy. Thank you for taking the time.
Oh, it's such a pleasure.
Yeah. And Amy, of course, I don't think she needs any introduction. She's done an amazing job bringing up two wonderful girls. And she's done actually an amazing job bringing the conversation on China or introducing Chinese culture to the world. But, I also want to shine some spotlight besides her excellence in mothering. I looked at your resume. Three things stand out. One, a great teacher winning the Best Teaching Award at Yale Law School. Two, amazing author on a diverse range of subjects, very serious subjects, actually immigration, ethnicity, global power, fate of nations, etc. And three, a great thinker and influencer. She was named one of the 100 most influential people in the world in 2011 by Times Magazine. Of course, there's all the Harvard and Yale aura. But besides that, one thing I do want to say on a personal level, I was on the panel with Amy once, and I know she looks as glamorous as she does in photo, always like impeccably dressed. And as we all know, as mothers, it takes a lot of time to look that good. So I'm going to kick off with the first question, and then Wendy and I will tag team, okay? The first question for you, Amy, how did you do that? There are only 24 hours a day. Do you ever sleep? Give us a case of what your day is like.
First of all, thank you all for joining, and May, thank you for organizing this. Wendy, and thank you for participating. I think under lockdown, it's especially weird it's hard to get motivated, even though I'm doing nothing all the time.
Good to hear that from you.
I'm just strangely exhausted doing nothing. But it's so much fun, to be with, I think, I don't know, people. To me, honestly, it's so nice when you introduce me that way, but I do not feel like I'm a parenting expert in any way. Since you guys read the book, I think it's, you guys, you know, we can talk about that. But so to answer your question, it's so weird, Mei. I wrote that book 10 years ago. It's been 10 years.
Yeah.
And so I have this new thing coming out that's like a prequel sequel, but when I reread passages of that book, I feel exhausted. I feel like, who is this crazy person? And so I think it'll be fun to talk to you guys because I'm significantly older. I must be like, I was at Harvard, but probably like 30 years before Wendy.
I don't think so.
So, but I am probably like a lot of people, to be very honest, I'm extremely organized and disciplined. Sometimes I worry that I'm too disciplined. Like, I think this is now that I'm starting to think about larger questions like happiness for your children. But you know, when the kids were little, I would fit it all in by basically just shrinking the amount of sleep and the amount of fun I had no leeway, you know, and I would get in, I would snap at my husband a lot. I now notice because I just had no wiggle room. It's like, you know, in order for me to do all that, I can't be like, what? You're 10 minutes late? You know, it's like everything will explode. And I have a lot more views about that. So I am somebody that always got up very early, 5:36, quite regimented. You know, I love that morning coffee. I can only work on my writing in the morning. My brain slowly dies after like 3 hours. So I know that. So I do all my writing first, and then I go running. I do all the exercise stuff. And so, but back when I had the kids, you know, there were even more limits. I mean, I would do the running, then sometimes I would wake up and practice with them at like 7 to 8, you know. Then I would go to school, teach, and unlike other people, the stuff that had to go is I couldn't just have coffee with people unless it was part of the schedule. I would often, in the middle of office hours, race to pick up my girls and do something with them and race back. And so basically every second was scheduled. And I think the worst of it was when the girls became teenagers and I came home exhausted from work, like at 6, thinking that now we've got to start the homework and now we've got to do the music. So I would be exhausted and very short-tempered, and they would be exhausted. And we were supposed to just start revving things up, you know? So that's the long answer. I think it's just a lot of organization and discipline.
Amazing. So did you get 5 hours sleep?
I'm lucky. I'm not somebody, I like 5 or 6 hours of sleep. That's a maturity in me too. Like I figured out that it was inefficient to get less, you know? But yeah, I can do like 5 or 6 hours.
That's amazing. Wendy, I know you have a burning list of questions. Go ahead.
Oh, you're muted.
You're
Yes.
muted.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm trying to keep out the noise from the dog and the 2 boys in the kitchen. You know, I just have to say, Amy, that I loved your book. I was in awe reading it, actually, because I feel like I tried to do so many of those things that you managed to accomplish, and I just failed. Like, I just couldn't do them, but because of just lack of organization, lack of time. Also, I have 2 boys. I don't know if that makes a difference. But so I think one question I have is, you know, we're in the middle of right now we're in the middle of trying to figure out how to parent in a pandemic, and moms are really stressed out. And, you know, aside from keeping our children safe and trying to keep our homes virus free, I would love to know if there's sort of, you know, what's one easy thing that you think moms can do nowadays to try to help their kids achieve more? Like, what would be it seems like so much of what you did with your own children really took so much effort. Is there anything easy that can be done?
Oh my gosh. You know, I was thinking about this quarantine question, and I was going to apologize to Mei and say, in a way, I think I'd be the worst at this, you know, because, you know, it was bad enough that my kids would come home from school and then I would do all these things. I think it would be so hard if now the parent has to play the role of the school. I know that some of you, I mean, I know have online school and things like that, but for younger kids, I think parents have to do like their own, you know, it's funny that you asked me about achieving, because maybe I'm just like at that stage 10 years later. I mean, my kids are, you know, 23 and 27. I mean, they're so old now. I'm like more thinking about all these things that I learned to kind of make things like a happier environment, you know. And so just on the hardcore Tiger Mom stuff, yes, I imagine that I would be in that camp. I don't think it's good or bad, but I would be in the structured camp. That is, I would say, even though we're in quarantine, we're going to do an hour of this, we're going to have a break. But I honestly think it would be very hard for me, because especially with my younger daughter, who was incredibly rebellious. I mean, she just came home for 10 days. We were very close. But at the end of that 10 days, we all decided she had to go back to her apartment. But, you know, I started hiring tutors and things just to have it not be me. So I think in quarantine, it must be so difficult because you can't have that many people coming in and out. One thing that I'm writing about now, and this is maybe going to disappoint you because it's like the anti-Tiger Mom thing, but especially when they got to be teenagers and things were so difficult, I realized that I actually had to appreciate her tempo. I think that all people have different tempos. And I think you can figure out that I'm a fast temper. If I just move fast, I talk fast. It's always go, go, go. It's very hard for me to relax. My younger daughter takes after my mother-in-law, my late mother-in-law. Nobody moves more slowly. I mean, and you know, she can, I'll wake up, she'll be like 1 o'clock still sleeping, you know. And we had so many fights, and I finally realized that it was actually inefficient for me to just be fighting all the time. And when I just kind of went with her flow, like I remember once she just wouldn't get out of bed to start some homework, and I was panicking. I was like literally counting down the hours. You're supposed to do a paper, you haven't started. And finally, this is pre-quarantine, I just said, let's go for a walk. And in a way, it was the hardest thing for me, because all I could think is we have no time. We got to work. There's a test. There's a paper. And instead, we went for this slow walk, you know, and I had to hold myself back. It was the best thing. And that was a kind of a late in Tiger Momming discovery that sometimes you just need to release, you know. And then she came back and she was in a better mood. Then she kind of did it. So those are the kinds of tricks I've been focusing on, because I know that I'm very good at just, you know, I was raised by Tiger parents myself. So I always believed, like I never, when I think about, I'm curious what kind of parents you had, Wendy, because I just never had any doubt that I could do it, because I'd seen it done. And so it was a wake up call when I actually couldn't quite do it my way, the way when, you know, Lulu came along.
Yeah. I had the opposite of Tiger parents. I mean, they were always telling me to go to sleep. Like, you're burning the midnight oil. You're up way too late doing your homework. Go to sleep. You know.
My husband too, and that's why he couldn't do it. He just couldn't do it. You know, because it just felt too cruel and too mean to him. He couldn't do it.
One of the big, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to chime in that one bit. It's interesting, Amy. When I read the book, I had none of this tiger parenting. I grew up in China. You know, the entire life up to before graduate school, it was like studies on your own. You do everything on your own. If you figure something out, a latchkey kid, everything's on our own. Therefore, you know, it's very much, our parenting style is very much dependent on what we grew up with, right?
Completely. And I have this line that not everybody has kids, but everybody had parents. And I think that the way we parent is always in some ways a response to how we were raised, either trying to copy it or trying to just do the opposite. If you had a bad childhood, just running as far as possible from that model. So I know many people in China, you know, I've talked to them there, or many of my friends who did have tiger parents say, I do not want that for my kids. Anything but that. And I've talked to a lot of Asians like that. You know, in my case, and this is in this new thing I'm writing, I was very lucky because my parents were strict, but my dad was not typical. my dad was actually like this wild man rebel, a very,
Right.
kind of a mad scientist, but also wanted to try everything and taught me how to chop wood. Oh, you know the book. I mean, he was always trying to do extreme things. Let's go to the highest mountain, the crookedest street, so that was a little bit different in my life. And I now think it's that combination. My honest view of the perfect way to raise kids, and this is easier said than done, is combining some of that early discipline and work ethic. Like if you can instill that early with a rebellious streak, I think that is a great combination. And it's kind of my view that I think in a lot of Asian societies, it's just too repressed. And it's hard to get that creativity and leadership and spontaneity going. Whereas I do believe in this part of tiger parenting. I think studies show that if you can get your kids to be able to be disciplined early on, that it just generally helps later on, even if what they want to do is, ski or something. It's just.
I'm burning with this question. What is early? Are we too late? Is it 11-year-old? I have 3, 11, 14, 17. What?
I don't think it's ever too late, but I think that it depends on what your goals are, right? But my own view is that it is kind of like before they become teenagers.
Oops.
Because once they become teenagers, I think it's hard to get them to do anything. I was very strict, but one thing about Sophia and Lulu is in high school, everybody was stressed, but they in a way were ironically almost less stressed because they actually could sit down because of their music training and like work on a paper for 3 hours. Whereas in this time of all the social media distractions and, it's, I think that concentration. So you have people, it's 2 a.m, they haven't started, they get stressed, and then you have to take, I don't know, Adderall or this. And it's just, so I am kind of a fan of that early discipline. I think it has kind of long-term benefits, but there are downsides too. Like if you get my daughters on here, they can give you the other side.
We'd love to run a follow-up. Sorry, Wendy, go ahead.
Well, no, a lot of what I'm finding really hard about this pandemic and quarantine is that, I've spent my whole, parenting life trying to keep my boys off of screens. And suddenly everything, their online schooling, they're doing rehearsals for their musicals they're in on the screen, they're socializing, every single thing has to happen on a screen. And it's just so hard I've just had to give up completely any kind of supervision because time I think, oh, maybe they're playing a video game. No, they're talking to teachers. So I don't know. That's just one thing that I found very hard is, was that an issue at all? It seems like that was not an issue at all in your household, screen time.
Yeah, I just missed it. Like towards the end, when Lulu, it's not in the book, then screen time became a big issue. Texting became huge, after the book came out. So we made rules about that. But the other thing about this pandemic is, this is going to sound weird, but I do think that everybody should give themselves a little bit of a break. It's almost like we're in this, I would treat it like a little bit of an emergency,
Yeah.
And just let some stuff go, because I think I just think would require superhuman. It's hard enough to do what you're doing, and then to all be in the same house, and then on the screens and doing, I think my heart goes out to you, honestly. I'm so impressed.
Okay. No, nothing to be impressed with, but it's just the really tough thing also is that as Mei will understand is that nobody can travel. Like we're so used to our whole business, raising children, everything that we do involves travel as well, which of course there's a complete shutdown in. So it's just, everything's kind of upended.
Actually,
Yeah.
in our case, without the traveling portion, it's easier to be a parent. We're more present now. At least I find it that way. So actually, Amy, you talked about this while you were supervising all the rehearsals and everything. You were on the road all the time. How did you do like across time zone, long distance supervision?
Yeah, I was really nuts. Sometimes, if you read that one page, I can't believe what I did. And so different from my husband. I was just arguing with them. I would get an invitation to speak in San Francisco, and I would literally get up at 3 to fly there, give a lunch talk, and then take the red eye back so that I could, be with the kids again. So I wouldn't exactly recommend this for all the young mothers out there. I think I wore myself down, and I do have some regrets. I mean, I don't have big regrets. My kids love to come home, so I corrected in time, like they're coming home tomorrow. And I talked to them. But I do feel like there was a period when they were in their teens that I almost feel like there was just very little room for joy and exploration. I was so tightly wound. And I have different views. I think our whole educational system is messed up. Like, I don't even think it's the parents' fault, like with this college admissions thing. It was nothing like that when I was growing up. I mean, I had strict parents, but I had all afternoon free. We didn't have to do anything. So I'm with my colleague, Daniel Markovitz. I think it's gotten to the zero-sum game. And I almost think it's at a breaking point where my own view is like the Ivy League is going to have to, it's like China. Getting into the Ivy League is like getting into Chinese schools now. And I think we're going to have a correction where people just don't care about that as much. Because the numbers are ridiculous and it's just too misery inducing. And then to spend, from 8th grade to, just doing only that, I don't think it makes sense.
I just went through the whole college admissions process with my older son, and thank God that's over. But now I've got the younger one and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, we're headed into the summer. What is he going to have? What can he put on his resume for what he did over the summer? And normally you could be a camp counselor or you could get a summer job. But this summer, in a pandemic, what can you really do other than spend more time on the screen? And so it's just interesting, the whole college admissions thing, this quarantining and pandemic really has gotten in the way of that. What with
everything.
The ACTs and all the rest of it.
Yeah. And it's also, I think we've gotten to the point where these extracurricular activities everybody's kind of doing the same thing. And it's hard to distinguish yourself. And I guess if I were to give advice, I would say it's almost better to do something that's not that fancy, but to get to know some supervisor or somebody. And it doesn't have to be a famous person, but that can just say something very, very nice about your child, more intimate. I found that to be, even if it's camp counselor or something else, but I always also see this in the extracurriculars. It's like the zero sum. It's so, I don't know. It's like a whole industry,
Explain that a little bit more, Amy. What was your suggestion again?
Well, I just feel for who are thinking about what extracurriculars to do for have their kids do, because there's only a limited number of things, and so many of them become so competitive. Like if you do Model UN or debate or violin or piano. So especially with the sudden spike in competitiveness, I'm now telling people, don't do all the things that I did with my kids. Don't do the piano and violin. That's too many people doing that, why don't you choose something completely different so you're more unique, like the oboe. If you're really just spent, the French horn or something, or I don't know. It's just, because at Yale, what we do is the Yale law professors, we are part of the admissions process. So we read, this is at the law school level, but if a candidate comes after they pass a certain threshold, their application is read by 3 faculty members. So I see all the scores and the letters, and I kind of have a feeling that some people try to get very famous people to write the letters, but I think it's more effective if the person that's writing letters not that famous, just somebody who actually really knows your child and can bring them to life in some ways. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, absolutely. This is something like everyone raising their kid with an eye to where they're going to go to school in the future. And one of the things I know a lot of other parents and I have talked about is in America in particular, there's so much emphasis on leadership. your interpersonal skills. And therefore all the parents will be supportive on play dates, sleepovers. I mean, those are the two things on your first page. American parents will go like, wait, those are essential skills, more essential than solving the extra bonus math problem. Right? How do you strike a balance? All the parents want their kids to be straight A's, but have all the interpersonal skills.
Yeah. So I don't know if the audience is mostly in China or elsewhere, but I've said before that I think China or Asia and the West have opposite problems. I actually think a lot of kids that are growing up and who go to Chinese schools, I mean, not the international, but more, if your school is really strict, basically, I feel like it's the role of the parent to counteract that. So I think that, I used to give talks in China after the Tiger Mom book came out and people would be stunned. I was like, in America, I think, sure, play dates and sleepovers are important, but how many do you need? Every night, and whereas I do feel like a lot of kids in Asia, I would go talk to Chinese kids at dinner, like high school kids, sit there with like 12 kids. And I would notice, wow, these guys are not able to be as interesting conversationalists. If you're sitting with like a bunch of 10 American teenagers, it's like everyone is talking confident. Everyone has a view, 16-year-olds have views about foreign policy in Iraq and whether they're right or not. But in China, it's, I would notice they would, it's part of the culture. They raise their hand and I carried the Olympic torch in the Olympics, but if you were to ask them, like, what's your favorite painting? What's your favorite book? Harder to get that going, harder to get a debate. And I don't really know if the answer to that is play dates and sleepovers. I mean, to me, that's kind of a weird thing. Like one thing that Jed and I did, in our household, because I grew up at dinner, Chinese style. We did not have family discussions. We just ate really fast and then went to do our homework. So I went to law school. I didn't have that skill. The professors would say, what's your view of this opinion? And I would just think a judge wrote it. It must be right. So I think that another thing that Asian or, again, parents who want their kids to have more leadership skills, there are other ways of helping your children develop that quality. And it could be helping them form their own opinions, so at dinner, what do you think of these paintings? What does it remind you of? Or everybody read this poem and we're going to talk about it. And, let's fight. So I think sometimes sleepovers and play dates are over romanticized. I mean, I barged into one and I don't think there was anything positive about it. So I think some of it is fun to let kids know how to socialize and solve their own problems, but I'm not so sure. I mean, I think that you have all the social dynamics. You're going to get bullying. You're going to get mean girls. You're going to get, so there, that I think some of that is good, but I think there are other ways of trying to teach your kids how to have their own opinions, their own views. And you can be quite self-conscious about that, knowing that that's like, I think something that's not as strong in Asia.
Yeah. Now, just one little bit of information, it's going to blow your mind. My kids are asking for virtual sleepover, keeping their screen on all night during pandemic.
Well, we're doing Zoom cocktail parties, so in a way that makes sense. Oh my gosh. Yeah, well, at least there's certain things they can't do. So.
Right.
And Wendy, I think you had some more questions on travel.
I mean, now that your kids have grown up and you can look back on everything, what, if anything, what is this thing you sort of most wish you might have done differently? And also, what is something that people really frowned on that you are just so glad you stuck with it and you did for your kids?
I have a lot of things that I wish I could do over. One thing that must be obvious to people is that children will copy you, they will imitate you. So one thing I wish is I hadn't lost my temper so much, because now I'll be talking to one of them and we're such a loud family and I'll like, don't yell like that. Don't talk so loudly. And they're like, that's how you talk, So in addition to what I tried to teach them, I wish I'd paid more attention to the way I was acting, the way I talk to my husband, I just think kids pattern themselves on you. So in a way, I think this is a good thing. My father was he loved big parties, very social. And I was like that too. So I think my kids saw that kind of fun side. I do wish that I'd given Lulu, I wish I'd given both kids a little bit more choice about their activities. I mean, I had no idea why I was so stubborn about, you got to do the violin. I just got it into my head. This is a hard instrument and I want you to do it a hard instrument. Especially because Lulu's personality is just doesn't fit that. I mean, she became president of this society. I mean, she's very social. Things that I'm proud of. Ironically, even though I fought the most with Lulu, she's the one that I am most happy that I stuck with it. I sometimes think that Sophia was so motivated. Maybe I didn't need to do it at all. I mean, she was just completely her own person and very self-motivated, very disciplined. I'm convinced, and I still think I'm right, that Lulu and a lot of second children, or it's not always a second child, but if you have one very, very motivated, high-achieving kid, it's amazing how often another one will try to be the opposite of that. And I think it's because they don't want to compete. They're scared of competing. So I can't tell you how many parents I've talked to. They're like, oh my God, I have a Lulu. My oldest kid's very, rule oriented. And my other kid, she's burning down this. And I think a lot of it is fear that you're the younger kid. And sometimes it's a reverse order, but the younger kid, in my case, is afraid that they're not really smart enough, that they're not as good as their oldest sibling. So they just don't really want to try. So, with Lulu, I mean, just to give you one example, with colleges, Lulu said, I'm not applying to, Harvard and Yale. I'm my own person. I want to do this, and you guys are obsessed with this, and I hate this, and whatever. And there's a lot of truth to what she said. Like, I think, as I just said, I've had 10 years to think about this, but I am very proud that I didn't just defer to her. So I have friends now whose kids went to college. They chose their college because they went on the college campus tour. And I think if you give your kids too much choice, like, they'll often pick the college based on, I went to a party and there was a cute boy, or they went to one lecture and they were dazzled by the professor. And then, they actually go there and they're not as happy at the school. So what I said to Lulu is, I was very, very strict about this. I was like, you are going to apply to all these schools. Because the worst that can happen is you get rejected, and rejections are good. Rejections are good for character. I've been rejected thousands of times. You have to be able to deal with that. After you have options, you can pick anything you want. But I was very strict about, I wouldn't let her not apply to certain schools. And I'm not saying that this is the right thing for everybody, but it was very interesting that in Lulu's case, I was right, that it was in large part a fear that she wouldn't get into a bunch of things. Because once she did get into various schools and she visited, she changed her mind. So I think that there is something, talking to a lot of my friends who have kids the same age as mine, who would be about 10 years older than a lot of the people here. We all have regrets. Those of us who are so too strict have regrets in one direction. A lot of my friends who are more lenient have regrets in the other direction. Like, why did I just listen to my kid and she's at, X college in Seattle and she's trying to transfer and it's really hard at this point. I just thought she was in love with the place, but now she hates it. Because kids really are kids. They're 17 when they're making these decisions.
Right.
That is very, I find it very inspiring.
Well, it's contrarian. It's definitely controversial because if you go to college counselors, it's let your kids, do you want rural or small or big? And I was much more autocratic about that. I was like, this is not a, vacation, rural.
Did you take them on college tour actually?
No.
No, you just gave them a list.
No, again, I was very, very contrarian. There is a tiger mom streak in me. I was like, you know, we'll go on the college tour after you get in. I don't have enough money to fly around the country, having you, you know, so I was pretty, I mean, it was easier for me because my kids wanted certain things. I think I would have deferred if they said, no, I really, 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 I'm really good at this and I want to be in an engineering school or something. But they were pretty much wanting to stay on the East Coast. So we didn't do college tours.
Mm-hmm. So I have two screens I want to show you because this is something I received from the audience. Can you see?
I can see, but I can't read it well. Yeah.
Right, 18 Chinese. It's actually a quote from your another edition of your book in China. This is a quote from Sophia that says, "Everyone thought art was supposed to be sort of you're born with it, but Tiger Mom actually taught me, even if we're talking about creativity, you still need to put in effort." Right. Mm-hmm. And another quote from Lulu says, "I think in the future I'm going to be a Tiger Mom as well." Because holding your kids to a high standard isn't necessarily a bad thing because it signals that you have confidence in your kids. And the question that I received from our WeChat groups is what do you think of this now that you've had 10 years to mull this over?
I actually really agree with that. I think, again, I think that East and West have opposite problems. I think a lot of people in the West romanticize creativity. You know, they sort of imagine if you just give your child a saxophone, that just like amazing jazz is going to come out. And that's just not the case, you know, I mean, or even Einstein or Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, those guys were extremely disciplined. They worked, they had a lot of resilience. So I think that for creativity, you do need, unless it maybe for poetry or something, but that you need some sort of foundation. I used to say, you know, in order to invent string theory, you need to be able to multiply very well. But I still think there is something to the Western kind of individualism that is lacking in China. This idea of just, so again, I think the ideal is to combine the best of East and West. I like the discipline part of the you know, the Asian way. With my daughter Lulu, it's amazing. It's a much more mixed picture because what they say to the press, I got to tell you, parenting is harrowing. You know, I am so happy with the way they've come out, but even just like 2 weeks ago, you know, and especially kids now, they have us over a barrel because, you know, if one of my daughters just says, I'm depressed or I'm sad or I'm worthless, I'm in a panic, you know, like we're so terrified. Like, you know, I'll do anything to not have that. And so you have to watch carefully. When are they just manipulating you? Because I've noticed that she'll call, I'm depressed, this, and I'm like, should I drive up? Should I do this? Then I'll call 8 hours later. She's like, I can't talk now. I've got some friends over. So it's a tricky thing because some people really do have, you know, there are real anxiety issues, real mental health issues. I've had a lot of years to work with this and think about it. I've changed my view a lot. I think Asian families, like in my family, when I was growing up, you could not have any kind of mental anxiety. You know, we just didn't talk about it. But on Lulu's quote, it is true. Like she had a friend, a guy who only applied to some summer jobs. And she called me the other day and she said, Mom, I tiger friended Jason. She was like, you know, I said, you are just afraid you're going to get rejected. You need to get in those applications and mass apply. You're going to do that. And she was very proud of it. She said, you know, he had been rejected. He was moping around. He had no job. And she said, you know, stop feeling sorry for yourself. And, you know, he got this job in Baltimore. So I do think that they've internalized some of that. I think they, you know, I think that part I still really agree with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but Wendy, before I get your question, I want to let the audience know we will be opening up to questions in a little bit. So if you have questions, start putting them in the chat room and we'll get to them. Go ahead, Wendy.
Well, I just wanted to ask about the importance of travel because, you know, you did mention in the book that it was important to your family to travel internationally. I mean, by the time your daughters were, I think, like 9 and 12, you'd been to all these different, cities around the world. And in fact, my kids, I've dragged them all over the world. They've been to at least 50 countries each, but we've never ever would have found time to practice the violin or the piano on these trips. I mean, our trips are so jam-packed and not nearly as structured as yours. So I was amazed that you could manage to find the time. I love the way you would ask the concierges at different hotels, where can you find a practice piano? But I'm curious. First of all, was it difficult to make that time when you're in a foreign place? You want to spend all your time just absorbed in that foreign place and spend every minute kind of out strolling and exploring. So was it difficult to then spend 2 hours, in a piano practice room or in the hotel room with the violin?
Yeah, I think that was one of my mistakes. I mean, when I think back on it, it was crazy. Like, I felt I couldn't take off 2 days, I mean, sometimes it's longer than that. It's a close call, because they achieved, Lulu played the Mendelssohn Concerto at 13. Like, no one can take that away from her. But I don't know, on that one, I think it may have been a mistake. I don't know if it was worth it. But the problem is, I always feel like, if you give an inch, you miss one day, then you can miss another, you can miss another. I will say, on the traveling, and not just because you guys are, this is a coincidence, traveling was so important. And especially in my own childhood. And you have to realize, my parents had no money. So this is not something you have to be wealthy to do. My dad was a professor at Berkeley, but we stayed in Motel 6s in the United States, and Holiday Inns. I have one story that I'm writing about in this new thing. My dad really wanted us to experience the Ritz in London, but we had no money, family of 6. So he got one room, like for a single person, and then snuck all 6 of us in, one at a time. And we slept on the floor using like bathrobes and towels as blankets. I've written this up. It was like one of the most fun experiences. And I said, that first encounter with splendor is something I'll never forget. Like, now I'll go back and, oh gosh, it's like why is the bathroom so small or something? But it was magnificent. And again, my dad didn't have a lot of money, but we went to the tallest cathedral, the highest Zermatt, and I mean, always the smallest country, Liechtenstein and Andorra. And it was so transformative for me. I don't think that this tiger parenting necessarily would have worked without that, because it was like our one time in our family where we just did completely different stuff. So completely coincidentally, travel was a very big deal in my own childhood too. And really kind of changed the way I thought about everything.
Do you feel like raising global citizens, was that part of sort of the parenting? I mean, at least for me, and probably for Mei, that's just an important fit. Like, we want our children to be global citizens and to be worldly in that kind of way, and to understand other cultures and see the similarities with completely different cultures. And I'm just wondering how much of that played into what you wanted to inculcate in your kids.
A lot. I mean, I write about ethnic conflict and foreign policy. I think that so much of our strife is just ignorance. We took the kids when they were very little to Fez in Morocco, and I very much so. I think that was a lot of it. We grew up in a mixed family. My husband's Jewish, and so this was this kind of idea of to have an open mind and see that there are many, many different ways of doing things was very important for us, for sure. I mean, in the case of China, it was a little bit different. It was almost the opposite. I really wanted my kids to feel Chinese. And there are those lines in the book where they're like, Mom, no one thinks we're Chinese. We don't look Chinese.
Yeah. There's one question here. It says, This person is curious, if you were tiger boyfriending, like if you were specifying requests, wow, this is a fine young man for my daughter. What are the features of this young man you would choose? It's a funny one.
It is funny, but my mom, I used to just think my mom said crazy stuff. When I was little, she's like, get a healthy one. And don't get one that's too handsome because you're not going to be able to trust them. And don't get, so she had all these things, but I think that you've got to be able to have the same sense of humor. I think that is, marriage is hard. And I think the ones that make it, obviously some form of compatibility, but by the way, back on this tiger thing, I think that laughter in our house is something that fortunately we had, just because I'm a silly person and we tried to have it. But I think for a significant other, same sense of humor. I would also, my older daughter just got engaged, and I really liked it when this guy came to New York to meet us. It was interesting. He, because we live in this world of millennials, he flew into JFK, but then he did that thing that none of us ever do, which is he took the bus and the subway and all that stuff, and I really liked that. I thought, wow, that's that's a nice sign of frugality and discipline. So I look for qualities like integrity, and I'm not somebody that's very into marrying somebody very wealthy. That would be kind of the bottom for me. But it's a funny question. I of course I think compatibility first, and you have to respect each other. I think there's so many differences now. Like I needed a husband that, I don't know, was as driven as me, but I have so many friends who have children, daughters, who are marrying husbands that are more mellow than they are. So the daughter is like the driven one, and then there's like a lovely guy that is more supportive. That's not a model that I was used to, but I've seen it work over and over. So I think there's you can really mix it up. And my colleagues, a lot of them are like that where one person works and the husband takes care of the kids. There are new combinations these days.
Or tag team. There's a time for one to lead, and a time for the other, right? There's another question. Wendy, are you seeing any other questions?
I am. Yeah, there are some terrific questions.
Yeah.
There's so many, I'm not sure which to choose. There's one about, do you have any specific advice for parents with multiracial kids? And also any advice for parents with kids with learning issues like ADHD?
So quickly, multiracial, we had that. And I think you almost have to have a sense of humor about it. Like I so many times when my kids were little, I was strolling them. People thought I was their Chinese nanny because, they had curly hair. And some people get very upset about that. And I just kind of thought, but I do think there are issues. Like you have to kind of prepare your kids that this might happen. You're going to get these statements. My husband prepared my kids because he taught them that they were Jewish. But because it runs through the mother, they're technically not, according to some more orthodox rules. And we prepared them. We're like, you're going to talk to your friends and say you're Jewish, and they're going to say you're not. And that happened, actually. And they were upset, but at least they'd been prepared for it. They had an answer. For special needs, it's just tricky. You all know, I think my youngest sister has Down syndrome, and my mom was the best tiger mom with that. I think that's tiger mom in its best. It's not about success in colleges. It's like, how can you, even within your child's limitations, make them the best that they can be. So I don't have advice as an expert. It's like hats off again. You just have to have extra patience, I think, and also just keep telling yourself, like, look, what is their starting point, and how, what can you do that's within reason that can make them feel proud of themselves?
Mm.
Right.
Yeah, great. There's a question here. It says, it sounds like you have modified your view over the last 10 years. what do you think still are the most important principles to apply to child rearing?
I do still believe that self-esteem, real inner confidence, cannot be given. It would be so much easier for us if we could just, if parents could just say, you're amazing, you're amazing, you're amazing, and then that would give confidence. I think, sadly, I still believe that for your child to have real inner strength or confidence, they have to like overcome something. It can be something small, you know, like learning, you know, to take off the training wheels or something. But so I still believe in that. You know, some of it is just your values. Like I was very tigerish with my younger daughter about graduate school. And I admit that it's irrational and it's not necessarily fair. The tiger mom reared its ugly head, about a couple after she graduated. I was just on her case and she would call me out. She'd say, oh, I thought you were not a tiger mom anymore, that after I graduated, I could have my choice. And I said, okay, no, I take that back. I was like, and then I was shameless about it. I was like, if she had a great job working for actually Joe Tsai, the Brooklyn Nets basketball. And she was living in our apartment and I was shameless about it. I said, you have 1 year free rent. If you want to keep working, you pay us rent or you find your own place. But if you go to graduate school, any graduate school, we will pay everything. So, I mean, you could also alter incentives. That's another way to do it.
Were you ever concerned because you make deals? Would it cultivate sort of this deal-making mentality? If I do a little house chore, you got to pay me $5.
I worry about it all the time. I worry about it all the time. And yeah, I try to, and also, I mean, there are a lot of things about, first of all, never threaten something where you can't follow through. That's one thing I learned, and that's why with Lulu, I stopped threatening certain things because she was so stubborn. She would call me out. Like if I said, if you don't do this, then I'm gonna X. And if I wasn't willing to do X, she'd win, So, but yeah, I try to save the deal making thing for only very important things. As with everything, you have to have like some aces in the hole. It's very hard. I also think that some instilling of a real sense of responsibility is important. When the kids were almost at college age, I was desperate, anything to get them to study, anything. And I think now that I'm older, I'm like, be careful not to sell your soul, because I would say, okay, you don't have to do chores. You don't have to do this. I'll do everything. You just do your paper. And I now think that might've been a mistake. We become their slaves and they get this mentality, like the most important thing in the world is me, like getting into college, And I think that's not a good value system. So I started to change that up at a certain point. I thought it was very hard for me because I cared about this college thing so much. But at a certain point, I was like, look, if you're not going to be respectful, certain things are more important, like calling your grandparents. And if you're not able to do that, then none of this other stuff matters. And so I was happy that I made those corrections. Like you still have to kind of teach them what is the most important thing, because you don't want them to get too entitled. Like they're these, the more important than world peace is them getting into college. There are more important things than that.
Last week, I was reading your book. My daughters came in. I said, I showed the book to them. I said, the first page, it said, nothing below A is acceptable. And my 11-year-old said, really? What would she do if they didn't come back with an A? What was that?
This is crazy, but I just made it not happen. I have a line in this new thing, like I don't know. I think I was very, very fanatic about the school stuff. I really was. It's a good question. I mean, there was a lot of yelling. There was a lot of yelling. And
to you, Wendy.
Well, there's another great question here. To Amy, would you consider looking after the grandchildren in the future? I mean, I'd love to know, what kind of role do you now want to play, someday with grandchildren? What do you want to leave to them? What lessons, what life lessons? And
I would love to do the grandparenting thing. I think I've actually jokingly talked to my kids about that. If they can't quite do it, I actually think if I were a grandparent, I would go, I don't know, but I think I would go back to being more like a tiger mom again. My parents didn't need to do that because I was so strict. My parents were like, I'm like, what happened to you guys? I mean, they're just ice cream and fun all the time. But yeah, I'm excited about that. And that it might actually happen. So, there are tips like, for writing papers that my daughters still remember. I said, when you finish, what I said to them was like, if you start really late on a paper and then you pull 2 all-nighters, you're going to feel like, oh my God, I'm so proud of myself. This is great. I can't believe I did this. And you're going to feel like you worked so hard and you tried your best. But I was like, if you compared to somebody that started a week earlier and worked and worked and worked, that product is going to be better, So I did call back on this the grade thing. It wasn't so much about being mad at them, but I would really call them out. I was like, that doesn't count as the best. You're just exhausted now. You feel like you gave it your all because you started so late. And the other thing I would say is after you've finished a whole draft in a paper and you think it's great, you should switch your mind and tell yourself, that's my first draft, And so those are the kinds of things that I would lecture them about.
That's amazing. You mentioned you're writing on your next book, a sequel to this. Tell us about it. Can we get a sneak peek?
It's kind of like this conversation today, because next year will be the 10-year anniversary. And so it's a little bit more about my own upbringing and all that crazy travel. And also it is in some ways about these reflections, like what I think is right, what I still stand by. And I mean, stay tuned. We'll see. I'm almost done with it. So I'll definitely, give you guys a preview if it works.
Perfect. There's actually a question addressing this in the chat. It says, has the process of writing helped you relook at your relationship with your mother? If so, how?
My own mother.
Yes.
Yeah. Writing is something I love when it's going well. Otherwise it's I don't know if it's writing. Getting older and older has made me become more and more like my mother and to sympathize with her so much more. This is also in my new stuff. I don't know why I did all the housework and stuff. I mean, my husband and I have the same jobs, but I feel like I replicated a lot of the mistakes that my mother made. I mean, they're not mistakes exactly, but I did a lot of things that she did. And I think I have new admiration for my mom. So I've gotten much closer to her as just through the process of raising kids. Not so much the writing, I think. I think my mom, because she really was an immigrant, just barely understands that. She's kind of a tiger mom. She's like, is the book done yet? Why isn't it done yet? This is so hard, Mom. On this tiger mom thing, this is where I have very mixed views. So once a tiger mom, always a tiger mom. So I went on book talks after the tiger mom. I went to San Francisco where my parents are. My parents are 83. I love them. My daughters love them. They're my biggest supporters. But after I give a talk, I mean, this is like, I'm like in my 50s, I give a talk, all of everybody there, my friends, my daughters, they afterwards like, oh my God, Amy, you were great. You were amazing. Only one person, my mother, she'll come up and she'll be like, oh yeah, you were very good. You were very good. And then she'll, maybe don't flick your hair so much, or she'll say, maybe don't talk so fast. And, I'll then be very mad at her. Like everybody else is, why are you such a downer? But then it's so interesting. This is the question of love, right? Because then when I go back and I think about it, or I watch the video, I'm like, oh my God, my mom was the only one willing to be honest with me. You know, like she's, because of her, I can improve. So I'm very confused about this, because I do think in a way it does take real love and a willingness to not be liked, to be tough with your kids. You know, when I rewatched that video, I was like, oh my God, my mom was right. Like it looked ridiculous. But on the other hand, I don't want to be the kind of mom that your kids dread. Like, oh my God, you know, here's the phone call, don't answer. So it's a so that's the kind of thing I'm exploring in my new book. Like, how do you get that balance right? You know, but that's, yeah.
Can't
so my
wait.
mom's still definitely a tiger mom.
Can't wait. Would love to read the next book. I think we're out of time. Do either of you have a few words you want to share with the audience?
I was just going to thank you all. You guys are such vibrant, fun people. And, you know, Wendy, hope we can stay in touch, and tell people they can feel free to, you know, email me. I mean, my email's right on that Yale website, and it would be fun to continue doing this, May. It was so fun.
That's great. Thank you, Amy. A lot of wisdom. Yes, Wendy.
Terrific conversation, May. Thank you. There are so many other great questions here. I think a lot of people are going to email you, Amy, because there really are some great questions. I feel like
I know.
For another hour. So
yes. And yeah, thank you, Wendy. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I'm going to sign off.
Yeah, for
Bye.
all the ones who couldn't make it here, or who want to review the tips from this session is being recorded and will be available on WildChina's YouTube channel. It will also be carried as a podcast on caixin.com. And just a word for the next session, I don't actually have the book because it's going to be on your phone. In a month, we will be reading another book, audiobook by a British author, Paul French, called Murders of Old China. So we can't wait for that. And when Amy's book is out, oh, she signed off. Okay, we will get Amy's book to all the audience. Okay, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you. Thank you so much, May.
Thank you. Okay.